Living alone had never bothered me before. I enjoyed the quiet of my small apartment near campus, the predictable routine, the silence that allowed me to study without distractions. But all of that changed in a subtle, almost imperceptible way, until fear took over. At first it was just small things, details that could have gone unnoticed in daily life. A chair that seemed slightly out of place, a cup I swore I had left in the sink, but later found on the coffee table. I assumed I was just distracted, too tired to notice things properly. Then came the smell. A strange, sour, damp odor lingered in the air when I came home. At first I thought it might be an issue with the plumbing or something rotting in the fridge, but nothing explained that heavy feeling in the air, as if someone had been there just moments before. The first truly unsettling moment was when I found my laptop open, its screen glowing in the dark room. I was absolutely certain I had closed it before leaving that morning. My heart pounded when I saw a document open, pages upon pages of text. The paragraphs were long, aligned oddly, as if someone had been typing for hours without stopping. I skimmed through the content, but it made no sense. Disjointed sentences, some parts describing what seemed like my daily routine, as if someone had been narrating my life. My stomach churned. I changed all my passwords, shut the laptop, and tried to convince myself it was just some kind of virus or system error. That night, the smell felt even stronger, and an uneasiness settled in my chest. I caught myself staring at my bedroom closet, a cold shiver running down my spine. The next day, while talking to my best friend, I mentioned the strange incidents. She suggested setting up a hidden camera, just to make sure no one was sneaking in while I was out. It sounded extreme, but the idea lingered in my mind for the rest of the day. Before going to bed, I ordered a small security camera online. The next night, I installed it in the corner of my room, angled to capture a clear view of the closet door and my desk where my laptop sat. The thought made me feel slightly safer, like I was protecting myself from paranoia rather than a real threat. The next morning, as soon as I woke up, I grabbed the camera to review the footage. Everything looked normal at first, until around 3 a.m., something moved. A thin, pale figure slowly crawled out from the space behind my closet. My blood ran cold. He stood still for a few seconds, watching my bed. Then, moving with eerie patience, he stepped toward my desk and powered on the laptop. The footage showed his fingers flying over the keyboard, typing endlessly for hours. My breathing became shaky as I fast-forwarded through the video. He didn't seem rushed. He wasn't hiding. He moved as if he belonged there. After some time, he simply crept back into the closet, disappearing into the darkness. My mind refused to process what I had just witnessed. He had been there all along. He knew I was there. He had been watching me sleep. I sat frozen, staring at the screen, my body unwilling to move. My apartment, the place I once felt safe, had been invaded in the most terrifying way possible. Not by a thief, not by some random intruder who came and went, but by someone who had been living there all along. I couldn't comprehend it. The way he moved so casually, the way he sat at my desk and typed as if he belonged there. It was unnatural, wrong. He wasn't afraid of getting caught. He wasn't sneaking in and out. He had a place inside my apartment, behind my closet, in some space I didn't even know existed. My first instinct was to run. Get out. Call the police, never come back. But I forced myself to breathe, to think. If he had been hiding there for so long, why hadn't he done anything to hurt me? What was he typing? I needed to know. With shaking hands, I opened my laptop and searched for the files. My stomach clenched as I found dozens of documents, all named with random sequences of numbers. I opened the most recent one. It was about me. The first few lines described my night in disturbing detail, how I had come home from campus, made dinner, watched a show, then gone to bed. It recounted my exact movements, even small things I hadn't consciously noticed myself, like how I had adjusted my pillow 3 times before falling asleep. The next paragraphs were even worse. They predicted what I would do next. The words detailed how I would wake up, check my camera footage, and discover him. They described my panic, the way my hands would tremble as I scrolled through the file, my breath catching in my throat when I realized he had planned all of this. And then, at the bottom of the page, the last sentence made my blood run cold. "You are reading this right now. You will turn around in 3, 2, 1. I couldn't. Every muscle in my body locked up. I held my breath, listening, waiting. But there was nothing. Just silence. I couldn't stay here. Grabbing my phone, I bolted for the front door and rushed outside, my heart pounding so violently I thought I might pass out. The cold night air hit me like a shock, grounding me just enough to dial 911. My voice shook as I tried to explain, the dispatcher's calm tone doing little to ease my terror. Within minutes, flashing lights filled the street, and 2 officers arrived. I stood there in my pajamas, arms wrapped around myself, watching as they entered my apartment. I didn't move until they called me in. Inside, everything looked normal. The chair was where it always was. My bed, untouched. No sign of forced entry, no immediate indication that anything was wrong. But then, one of the officers moved toward my closet. When he pulled it open, the smell hit us all at once. That same damp, sour stench that had haunted me for weeks. Behind the rows of clothes, hidden in the shadows, there was a small opening in the wall, a crawl space. Inside, they found a makeshift sleeping area, a thin, filthy mattress, a pile of crumpled food wrappers, and an old, battered laptop. The space was empty. Whoever had been living there was gone. The police searched every inch of my apartment, but it didn't change the most terrifying fact. He was still out there. The officers took photos of the crawl space, collected the old laptop, and asked me a series of questions. Had I noticed anything else missing? Did I recognize the man in the footage? Had I ever seen him before? I could barely think straight, let alone answer. They didn't find fingerprints, no sign of forced entry, no way to tell how long he had been there. The officers told me it was possible he had escaped out the front door while I was outside, calling 911. Or maybe he had another hidden exit somewhere in the building. But the worst part was the laptop they found. Inside were hundreds of pages of text. Every single one was about me. Not just my routines or daily habits, but conversations I'd had, things I'd written in my personal notes, thoughts I'd never shared with anyone. It was as if he had been reading my mind, as if he had been watching me long before I even knew he existed. One document stood out. It wasn't about my past. It wasn't about my routines. It was about what was supposed to happen next. The text described how I would talk to the police, how they would search the crawl space, how they wouldn't find him. And then, at the bottom of the page, it said, "You will try to move on. You will think you're safe. But I will come back." My body felt ice cold. The police tried to reassure me, telling me they would increase patrols around my building, but there wasn't much else they could do. The officers left, and I stood alone in my apartment, staring at the open crawl space, wondering how many nights he had spent hidden just a few feet away from me. I never slept there again. The very next day, I packed a bag and moved in with a friend while I looked for another place to live. I couldn't be alone, not after what I had seen. Even with locked doors, even with police watching the area, I felt exposed, vulnerable, hunted. Weeks passed. I found a new apartment, a new building far from that nightmare. But the fear never really left. Even now, months later, I sometimes wake up in the middle of the night, convinced I hear the faint sound of keys being pressed. And every time I open my laptop, I hesitate, wondering if there will be a new file waiting for me. A new prediction. A new warning. Because if he had been able to hide for so long without me noticing, what's stopping him from doing it again? Living alone had never bothered me before. I had always enjoyed my solitude, the quietness of my small apartment, and the routine of coming home to a space that was entirely mine. But lately, something had changed. A strange feeling had settled in the back of my mind, a constant unease that made my own home feel unfamiliar. It started subtly. A shift in the air, a prickling sensation on my skin, the sense that someone or something was watching me. I tried to brush it off as paranoia, the result of too many late nights and not enough sleep. But the feeling persisted. The worst part was the bathroom. Every time I stood in front of the mirror, I felt it the strongest. My reflection seemed off, not in an obvious way, but as if there was something behind me, just out of sight. I would catch glimpses of movement in the corner of my vision, but whenever I turned my head, nothing was there. It became a routine. I would step into the bathroom, hold my breath, and stare at my reflection, waiting for something to happen. Nothing ever did. But the feeling never left. One evening, I decided to clean my bathroom. It wasn't particularly dirty, but I hoped that keeping myself busy would distract me from the nagging unease. As I wiped down the mirror, my hand pressed against it, and I felt it shift slightly. I froze. Mirrors weren't supposed to move like that. Carefully, I pressed against the edges, and the entire mirror lifted away from the wall with an unsettling ease. Behind it, in the dim light, a dark opening gaped at me. A hole. At first, I thought it was some kind of maintenance access, but as I leaned closer, the truth became clear. It wasn't a small cavity in the wall, it was a tunnel. A narrow, dark passage stretched beyond the frame of my bathroom, vanishing into blackness. A damp, musty smell seeped out, mixed with something foul, something that made my stomach turn. My pulse pounded in my ears as I reached for my phone and shined a light inside. The tunnel had been dug by hand. The edges were rough and uneven, the dirt packed down as if someone, something, had crawled through it repeatedly. I wanted to believe it was old, abandoned, something left over from before I moved in. But then I saw the prints. Faint, smeared handprints covered the dirt walls, some recent enough that the dust hadn't yet settled. Someone had been here, and not long ago. I forced myself to step away from the hole, my breath shallow and unsteady. Every instinct screamed at me to cover it, to pretend I had never seen it. But that wouldn't change the fact that it was there, that someone had been using it. For the rest of the evening, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. Every creak of the apartment made my skin crawl. Every shadow seemed to stretch unnaturally. I considered calling the police, but what would I even say? That I found a tunnel behind my mirror, that I felt like someone had been watching me. There was no proof. Nothing had happened. Not yet. That night, I did everything I could to ignore the bathroom. I shut the door. I left the lights on. But sleep didn't come easily. My mind kept replaying the image of those smudged handprints, the darkness stretching beyond the hole. Sometime after midnight, I woke up, heart pounding. At first, I didn't know why. The room was silent. But then, as my eyes adjusted, I saw it. The mirror. I had covered it with a towel before going to bed, but now the towel lay crumpled on the floor. And in the reflection, something moved. It was faint, just a ripple in the darkness. But as I watched, barely breathing, I saw the shape of a hand pressing against the inside of the mirror. I didn't move. I barely even breathed. The hand stayed there, palm against the glass, fingers too long, too thin. Slowly it dragged downward, leaving a streak in the reflection. Then the mirror shifted. It was subtle, Just a slight tremor, but I saw it. The edges wobbled, like something was pushing from behind. A scraping noise filled the air, low and deliberate, the sound of nails against glass. And then, before I could react, the hand vanished. For a long time, I couldn't move. My body refused to listen. I just lay there, staring at the mirror, waiting for it to happen again. But nothing did. Eventually, I forced myself out of bed. My legs felt weak as I stepped toward the bathroom. The mirror was still there, still reflecting my empty room. But when I reached for it, my fingertips trembled. With a deep breath, I grabbed the edge and pulled. The hole was open. The tunnel yawned before me, and this time there was no mistaking it. The dirt had been disturbed. The smell of damp earth and something rotting filled my lungs. And at the very edge, just where the light from my phone reached, I saw it. A figure, impossibly thin, crouched just beyond the opening, watching, smiling. Then, it began to crawl toward me. I didn't think. I didn't breathe. The moment I saw that thing crawling toward me, I turned and ran. My legs felt weak, my vision blurred with panic, but I pushed forward, nearly tripping over myself as I stumbled toward the front door. Behind me, I heard it moving. A slow, deliberate scrape of skin against the floor, as if it were dragging itself out of the tunnel. I didn't dare look back. My hands fumbled with the lock. The metal felt slick with sweat. My fingers clumsy, but after what felt like an eternity, the door wrenched open, and I threw myself outside. The hallway was empty, silent, eerily normal compared to the nightmare unfolding inside my apartment. I sprinted down the stairs, my heart hammering so hard it hurt. By the time I reached the street, my lungs burned. But I didn't stop. I just kept going. I don't know how long I ran. Eventually, I stopped at a gas station a few blocks away, barely able to stand. The cashier stared as I tried to explain, my words frantic, stumbling over themselves. I must have looked insane. When the police arrived, I expected them to dismiss me, to roll their eyes and chalk it up to paranoia. But when they entered my apartment, they found the tunnel. It led to an abandoned basement in a building a few streets away. The walls were covered in scratch marks, old blankets and empty food wrappers scattered across the dirt floor. Someone had been living there. Someone had been watching me. But the man, he was gone. They searched the tunnels for hours, but he had vanished, leaving behind only the lingering stench of damp earth and decay. I never went back to that apartment. I couldn't. The thought of stepping inside, of looking into that mirror again, made my skin crawl. To this day, I still wonder how long he had been there, how many nights he had watched me through the glass, and worst of all, if he ever left at all. I remember the first time I found a bouquet of roses on my desk at work. At first, it felt like a harmless gesture, something playful, maybe even romantic. There was no note, no name, just the delicate arrangement sitting there, waiting for me. My co-workers teased me, speculating about a secret admirer, but I dismissed it as a small mystery, nothing more. Then came the chocolates, a fancy box tied with a satin ribbon, placed on my chair before I arrived. I had no idea who could be doing this, but the attention felt both flattering and slightly unsettling. Over the next few days, the gifts kept coming. Small trinkets, handwritten letters, even a book I had casually mentioned in a conversation weeks ago. The fact that this person seemed to know personal details about me made the situation feel less like a romantic surprise and more like something intrusive. I started to grow uneasy, but still, I told myself it was just a harmless crush. Maybe someone was shy, afraid of revealing their identity. My best friend Michael joked about it, telling me to enjoy the attention. He always had a way of making things seem less serious than they were, so I laughed it off, choosing to ignore the small knot of anxiety that was beginning to form in my stomach. The unease turned into something closer to fear when I received a message from an unknown number. It was simple, just a compliment on my outfit. But the problem was, it was the exact outfit I was wearing at that moment. I looked around my office, my apartment, wondering if someone was watching me. The walls seemed to close in, my skin crawling with the realization that this wasn't just a harmless admirer. I blocked the number, but the fear didn't go away. That night, I double-checked my locks, made sure all the windows were closed, and tried to convince myself that I was being paranoid. But when I woke up the next morning, there was another envelope waiting for me outside my door. Inside were photos of me. Not just casual, everyday pictures. These were different. They were taken inside my apartment. Shots of me sleeping, curled up in bed, completely unaware of the camera that had captured me. My breath caught in my throat as I flipped through them, each one more invasive than the last. Someone had been inside my home. The realization that someone had been inside my apartment shattered any illusion of safety I had left. The walls that once felt like protection now felt like a cage, trapping me with an unseen intruder who knew my every move. My mind raced through the possibilities. How had they gotten in? When had they done it? How long had they been watching me? I spent the next few hours searching every inch of my apartment, checking every lock, every window, every corner where someone could have hidden. Nothing was out of place, yet I felt the suffocating presence of someone who had been here without my knowledge. I replayed moments in my head, times I had left my keys unattended, doors I had assumed were locked. Had I been careless? Had I unknowingly invited this nightmare into my life? Panic turned into action. I bought new locks, installed additional security measures, and placed makeshift traps around the apartment. Small things, like a cup balanced on a doorknob, strips of tape placed near windows. It was a desperate attempt to regain control over something that felt completely beyond my grasp. But no matter what I did, the fear lingered, a constant shadow at the back of my mind. Michael was the only person I confided in. His concern felt genuine, his anger almost matching my own. He insisted I go to the police, but I hesitated. I had no proof of who was doing this, just a collection of unsettling gifts, an anonymous message, and now these photos. Would they take me seriously, or would they tell me to change my locks and hope for the best? That night, sleep didn't come easily. I lay in bed, the covers pulled up to my chin, every creak of the apartment setting my nerves on edge. The weight of exhaustion eventually won, but even in sleep, my mind remained restless. In the days that followed, I moved through my routine with a forced sense of normalcy. Work, errands, home. I pretended to be fine, but every moment was tainted by the fear of what I couldn't see. I checked my traps obsessively, waiting for any sign that someone had tried to get in again. Then, one night, it happened. A loud crash echoed through the apartment, jolting me awake. My heart pounded as I sat up, ears straining to catch any movement beyond my bedroom door. The sound had come from the living room. I reached for the baseball bat I had started keeping by my bed, every muscle in my body tense as I slowly made my way out of my room. There, sprawled on the floor, was a figure. The trap had worked. One of the makeshift alarms I had set, a chair precariously placed against the front door, had been knocked over. My eyes adjusted to the darkness, and for the first time, I saw the person who had been tormenting me. Michael. The shock of seeing him there, inside my apartment in the middle of the night, sent a chill through me colder than anything I had felt before. He was breathing heavily, his eyes wide, a mixture of panic and something else I couldn't quite place. The reality of it settled over me like a suffocating fog. He had been the one. He had always been the one. The realization hit me like a slow, suffocating wave. Michael, my best friend, the one person I had trusted through all of this, had been the one behind everything. He had been inside my apartment, leaving gifts, watching me sleep. The thought made my stomach turn. He didn't move at first, just sat there, his chest rising and falling, eyes darting between me and the mess on the floor. My mind raced through the past weeks, searching for signs I had missed. The way he had been so invested in my fear, how he had always been the first to comfort me. It had never been concern, it had been control. He had played both sides, the stalker in the dark and the protector in the light. And now, he had been caught. A feeling of violation washed over me, stronger than anything I had felt before. I wanted to scream, to cry, to demand answers, but no explanation would ever undo what he had done. My home, my safe place, had never truly been mine. Every night I had spent locked inside, thinking I was alone. He had been there, watching, waiting. I didn't hesitate. My hands were shaking as I grabbed my phone, dialing emergency services with a numbness that barely felt real. Michael didn't beg. He didn't plead. He just stared at me, his expression unreadable, as if he knew there was no coming back from this. The police arrived within minutes, their presence filling the small space that no longer felt like home. I stood frozen as they restrained Michael, their voices distant, drowned out by the pounding in my ears. He was calm, eerily so, as they led him out, his gaze lingering on me one last time before disappearing into the night. I barely heard their questions, barely registered the officers explaining that he had likely copied my keys long ago, slipping in and out undetected. The locks I had changed had never mattered. He had been prepared. He had always been one step ahead. The following days blurred together. I stayed at a friend's place, unable to return to the apartment that now felt tainted. The walls held memories I didn't want to relive. Sleep became a distant luxury, every shadow in the room a reminder of the nights I had spent unaware of his presence. Eventually I moved. A new city, a new apartment, new locks that I checked 3 times before bed. The fear didn't disappear overnight, but with time, it faded into something quieter, something I could manage. I never heard from Michael again, but the thought of what could have happened if I hadn't set that trap, that thought never left me. I had always lived alone, enjoying the quiet solitude of my small house on the outskirts of town. It wasn't anything special, just a modest 1-story home with a small front yard and a backyard that led to a narrow alley. It was a peaceful neighborhood, the kind where everyone minded their own business. But then things started to change. It began with small, almost imperceptible disturbances. Trash bags outside would be torn open, their contents scattered in a way that didn't seem random, as if someone had been searching for something specific. At first, I assumed it was a raccoon, or maybe a stray dog, but the way the bags were carefully untied instead of ripped apart made me uneasy. Then there were the doors. On more than one occasion, I came home to find my front door unlocked, even slightly ajar. I was always meticulous about locking up before leaving, so I convinced myself I had been careless. Maybe I'd been in a hurry. Maybe I had imagined locking it. Then came the notes. The first one was left inside my car, sitting on the dashboard like a silent taunt. It was a small, folded piece of paper, and when I opened it, my breath caught in my throat. "Your eyes are so beautiful when you sleep." The handwriting was neat, almost delicate, as if the writer had taken their time forming each letter with care. A shiver ran down my spine. How had it gotten there? I always locked my car, just like I did with my house. Someone had been inside. Someone had been close enough to watch me sleep. Over the next few days, more notes appeared. Each one was worse than the last. They mentioned details about my daily routine, when I left for work, what clothes I had worn, what I had cooked for dinner. The realization that someone was watching me, studying me, turned my unease into full-blown fear. Sleep became difficult. Every night I lay in bed, listening to the silence of my house, waiting for something, anything to confirm that I wasn't alone. Then one night, I heard it. A whisper. A soft, drawn-out whisper of my name floating down from somewhere above me. At first I thought I had imagined it, that exhaustion was playing tricks on my mind. But then I heard it again, barely audible yet distinct enough to send ice through my veins. It was coming from the attic. The whispering didn't stop. It came in slow, drawn-out intervals, almost like a breath exhaling my name over and over again. I lay frozen in my bed, my heart pounding against my ribs, my ears straining to catch every sound. The attic. I hadn't been up there in years. I wanted to believe it was the wind, some trick of acoustics, but deep down, I knew better. Someone had been watching me. The notes, the unlocked doors, the disturbed trash, it all made sense now. Someone had been inside my home for far longer than I had realized. The next morning, I didn't go to work. Instead, I bought a set of security cameras and installed them inside and outside my house. If someone was coming in, I was going to catch them. I placed one in my bedroom, one in the living room, and one facing the attic door. That night, I barely slept. I lay in bed, watching the feed on my phone, waiting. Hours passed. Nothing happened. Just the occasional creak of the house settling, the distant hum of passing cars. I was starting to think I had let my paranoia get the best of me. Then, just past 3 a.m., the attic door moved. It didn't swing open completely. It simply shifted, a slow, deliberate motion, as if someone was carefully pushing it just enough to peek through. My blood ran cold. I sat up, holding my breath, my phone trembling in my hands as I watched the footage. A shadow lingered in the crack of the door, something barely perceptible, but there. I grabbed a flashlight and a kitchen knife and made my way toward the attic. My heart pounded in my ears, every step feeling heavier than the last. The attic door stood slightly open now, revealing nothing but darkness beyond. The smell of dust and something else, something rotten, drifted out. With one deep breath, I pushed the door open and aimed my flashlight inside. The attic was small, just enough space to crawl through, with old insulation covering the wooden beams. But what caught my eye first wasn't the dust or the cobwebs. It was the nest of blankets in the far corner. A pile of old dirty bedding, wrappers from food I hadn't bought, and something worse, a notebook. I picked it up with shaking hands and flipped through the pages. It was filled with writings about me, detailed observations of my daily life. He smiled at the cashier today. It made me so angry. I laid next to him last night. He didn't even notice. I think he's starting to hear me. My stomach turned. Someone had been living in my attic, watching me, whispering to me while I slept. Then I heard the floor creak behind me. The creak behind me sent a jolt of terror through my body. I spun around, the flashlight beam trembling in my grip, cutting through the darkness of the attic. But there was nothing, just the empty space, the low wooden beams, the dust swirling in the air. And yet, I knew I wasn't alone. Every nerve in my body screamed for me to run, but my legs refused to move. I scanned the attic again, my breath shallow, my heartbeat a deafening drum in my ears. The nest of blankets, the discarded food wrappers, the notebook filled with disturbing entries, it was all fresh. Someone had been here. Someone had been living above me. I backed away slowly, my hands slick with sweat. Then I saw them. Faint smudges on the wooden beams near the attic entrance. Fingerprints. Greasy, uneven marks where someone had been gripping the wood, possibly for support while they leaned down to watch me sleep. That was enough. I turned and fled, nearly stumbling down the attic ladder, my only thought to get out, to escape, to breathe fresh air away from the suffocating horror above. I barely remembered dialing 911, my hands shaking too much to type properly, my voice a hoarse whisper as I explained what I had found. The police arrived within minutes. They searched the house, checked the attic, combed through every inch of my property. But there was nothing. Whoever had been there was gone, but they had left something behind. On the wall of the narrow attic crawl space, scratched into the wood with something sharp, were the words, "I will always be near." I moved out the next day. I never found out how long she had been there. The police told me it was likely months, maybe longer. A former co-worker, someone I barely remembered, someone I had interacted with casually at work years ago, obsessed, unnoticed, lurking in the shadows of my home, studying every moment of my life in secret. Even now, in a new city, in a new home, I still check the attic before going to bed. I still wake up in the middle of the night, convinced I heard a whisper. Because no matter how far I go, I know she's still watching,